very much, Glenn, for the intro, and I want to thank all of you for coming yesterday, coming today, and spending your time to learn more about what you can do to help animals. So yesterday we heard from some great speakers. So Camille talked about law and how you can make a difference by leveraging the legal system. We also heard from Rob Laidlaw yesterday talking about how to polish up our campaigning and our approaches to doing the best we can to have a high quality campaign. So I don't want to do what they did. I want to talk to you, I guess, a little bit about just my experience, because that's what I know the best, is how I've lived my life, and just give you a little bit of background about where I came from and how I got to where I am today and what I've learned along the way. And I'd like to focus a little bit too about education, specifically how to get into schools, which some of you seem to be interested in, and I have some experience with that, so I'd like to share. And also how you can do a campaign by yourself with no money and not being part of a group, which is something that happened to me by default. So I have a lot of humility there, and I'm happy to share my experiences.
Are you going to use this at all?
No. Great. Awesome. That's better. Thank you. So for starters, I grew up in Windsor, Ontario, which is, does anyone know where Windsor is, or have anyone been there? It's sort of embarrassing to say this. I'm getting really personal with you people today. Windsor has the distinction of being Canada's automotive capital, and it's also the city of roses, which I don't know. I'm not sure how the two work out, but anyways, that's what it is. It's across from Detroit. It's a lot of industry there. It's a hardworking town and blue-collar town. So that's where I grew up. So I wasn't really around animals. I don't think there's any wildlife in Windsor. My dad's a mechanic. My mom is a nurse. Pretty normal stuff. I went to Catholic school. They wore the uniform, the whole thing. And so I grew up eating meat. Loved it. Tasted great. Every day after high school, I used to go to McDonald's and I'd get a Big Mac combo, root beer, hold the pickles, and I'd have my exact change with me. Also, growing up, I loved animals. I ate them, loved them. I didn't think much about it. And we had a lot of pets. We had lots of cats. I had a lot of hamsters, fish, birds. And I wanted to tell you a story about a rabbit also. We had a rabbit. It was actually the kid I used to play with. He had the rabbit at his house. But when I was a kid, I used to spend a lot of time outside, playing in ditches and trying to catch birds. And I really loved animals, but it was always kind of misplaced. Like I never figured out what that meant, right? I used to love the circus. I used to go to the aquarium, Marineland. I liked the zoo. So I was just kind of working through all that, I think, in my youth. So this kid and I, his name was Mike, and he was sort of my playmate growing up. And Mike and I would spend a lot of time outside. And Mike and I had it in our heads that we were really interested in catching wildlife and raising it ourselves. That was sort of the goal, is if we could find birds' eggs, that was ideal because we would hatch them ourselves. Tadpoles were great. And you get the idea. So anyways, the rabbit. So we were obsessed. Mike and I wanted a rabbit so bad, and it seemed to make sense that if you wanted a rabbit, you would just catch one, right? And we would keep it and have this rabbit. So we made this shoebox with like the stick and the string, right? This old school. This is our trap we had set up. We had like fruit roll-ups underneath, like as bait, and we used to spend like every waking moment sitting there with this damn trap, waiting for a rabbit to come along, and we would like catch this rabbit, right? So anyways, it wasn't working out so well. And probably about 2 weeks later, Mike comes running over and bangs on the door and, come over, the trap is down, there's something in the trap. So this is monumental. So we go running over and we lift up the box and there's a rabbit there. It's a black and white rabbit who's insanely friendly, and we're petting him, and we named him Thumper, and we had this whole thing figured out. And then, of course, what we learned was Mike's dad just went to the pet store and bought a rabbit and put the rabbit under the box. Anyways, but it's a funny story, so I just like to tell it. But it was all a part of these experiences, I think, about just just, yeah, loving animals and just really wanting to be around them and get close to them and having the best intentions, but I didn't have the knowledge. I didn't really understand my feelings quite yet, and I didn't know what it meant. I didn't know what it all meant. And of course, how I was raised, I mean, like I said, my parents eat meat. We had a very sort of 4 food groups dinner every night. It was like the pork chop with the potato starch with the vegetable. So I didn't question it. I mean, that's what my parents gave me. My mom seems like a reasonable person. That's what's for dinner. I don't know. I didn't ask a lot. So it was in grade 7, I think, where it kind of, there was a spark. And when I look back along my road to activism, I can kind of pinpoint those Dr. Phil moments, you know, where something kind of happened, you know, and then something else would happen, and then this all leads me down kind of this road, and I'm sure a lot of you have similar experiences. So for me, it was grade 7. There was this book, and it was in the library at school, and it was called The Use and Abuse of Animals. So, and it had a cat on the cover, which appealed to me, and I remember going through the book, and it was a real just kind of once-over about different issues, from everywhere from animal testing to factory farming to fur hunting, and the photos were like blew me away. So the whole concept of animal testing, when I learned about it, I almost fell over. Like it just was this whole what? Like I had no clue, and so I really got into animal testing, and was my thing, I think, for quite a few years. And then the meat thing didn't come until later. So I went through, you know, being a teenager and stuff, and then I kind of lost track of doing anything important because I think I was just so self-absorbed, like, you know, and had to have my own problems, and I don't know, I just kind of digressed there. Anyways, so fast forward a few years, enter PETA. I don't know where I was. Someone handed me a pamphlet one time, and it was, does your food have a face? And up until this point, I've been really interested in animal testing, and I would go off all about, you know, why you should buy products that aren't tested on animals, but I never really considered the food aspect. And I love meat. I mean, I loved it, like Big Macs and bacon, and so it was really confronting a lot of the things that I think, again, a lot of you have gone through, where looking at, well, I've never known anything different. I've never tasted different. I don't cook for myself. Like, so that article really just set things in motion for me, and I made the commitment to being vegetarian. And which I thought was so easy, because it was just meant I just ate more cheese. So so going vegetarian was like, I couldn't figure out why the whole world didn't go vegetarian, because it's like cheese pizza, cheese lasagna, cheese cannelloni, cheese, and that's all I ate was carbs and cheese, and it was a dream. And then of course I was so comfortable, right? And I felt so good and empowered. I'm vegetarian. You know, you can't mess with me. I've got my ethics covered. I love animals, and I don't eat them. And, you know, I don't buy stuff tested on animals. And so the self-righteousness set in a little bit, I think. And then, so that was good until someone told me what's wrong with eating cheese. So I was like, ah. And then, of course, I read Diet for New America. Someone lent me the book, and if you haven't read it, you should. It changed my life forever. So it's Diet for New America by John Robbins, and I read that book. I just blew through it, and I'm not really an avid reader. I have a short attention span, so reading is difficult for me unless it's really riveting material. And this book was. And basically what it does is John Robbins, who's heir to Baskin Robbins chain, basically said that he didn't want to be a part of that legacy, and he took a different path and started learning about basically where food comes from. So it was through that book that I started to learn about the cruelty involved in the dairy industry, where dairy comes from, how babies are taken away from their mother, and the whole concept that cows produced milk for humans. And I started to really think about that, I think, in terms of we're the only species to drink milk from another species after infancy, and just the weirdness kind of it all, and asking a lot of questions about that. And so while I love cheese, and I read a really good quote recently, and it said, I didn't give up cheese, or wait, I didn't give up what was it? I didn't give up cheese, or I gave up animal cruelty. And I thought that's an interesting thing, because it's not about the taste, and it's not about, you make a decision, right? You put something over your taste buds. So hence the road to veganism. So that was in 1999, and that was tough. I went through, for about 2 years, I was a little bit of a Nazi. When I first went vegan, not only was it a big change, but it makes you reevaluate everything in your life, right? Your relationships, your parents, holidays, all the little things. And I remember my roommate at the time came home with some cottage cheese. And anyways, we had a big blowout and I moved out. So exactly, it was completely unreasonable. But for me, like, that wasn't about him, right? That was about me, and that was me learning my boundaries and me trying to sort through all this intensity that I was feeling. Yeah, so I finally started to relax a little bit in my veganism, and then I took up my first campaign, which was the circus. I was living in Windsor, Ontario, and we would protest every year, because that's what you did, because the circus came and it sucked and everyone hated it, and we would go and complain and drag our signs and make everybody miserable, including ourselves. And then we started learning that, well, and kind of what Camille was saying is, like, what if we didn't have to protest all the time? What if we just shut it down? And so this is where I started to learn a little bit about the process of how do you do that? Like, who is in charge here? Whose decision is it to allow the circus to come to the city? Who can say yes or no? Who gives the permits? That type of thing. So with the help of Zoo Check Canada, we put together a campaign to ban the circus in Windsor. And over the course of, I think it took us 3 years, a lot of sweat, a lot of tears, a lot of sleepless nights, to put together this whole lobby effort to shut down the circus. And we did it. We banned the circus in Windsor. Wait. we banned the circus in Windsor. So for a few years, it was, and to this day, nothing can erase that moment. It was one of the best nights of my life, that council meeting. It was so intense. It was 2 hours. It was just on the verge of, like, oh, like, you know, which way is it going to go? And they voted almost unanimous. Just one councillor voted against, but to ban it. So then the city got sued, and unfortunately the bylaw was thrown out. Which was a combination of factors. There was mainly, I think, the bylaw was poorly written, was one of the problems. The city solicitor didn't really do his due diligence. There were issues with just jurisdiction at that point. It was sort of unclear what the city could do, what they couldn't do, and which was really unfortunate. But I learned a lot, I think, coming out of that campaign. And I worked my butt off on that campaign, and it gave me a lot of experience to draw on to then go forward and do other campaigns and do them by myself. Like, it really didn't take a lot of people, it didn't take a lot of money, it just took persistence. That's all that it is persistence and ambition. Know what you want, know how to get it, and go get it. And that's it. You just go and get what you want. And so at that point, I was working in radio, which I love, and I had a show that I did. I worked for both the commercial side of radio, and I also worked at the local university. I had my own show called Animal Airwaves every Monday on CJAM 91.5 FM. and we used to talk about animal issues, and it was a lot of fun, and it was a really good outlet for me. And so at that point, I started to really, I was getting antsy because I was doing this animal stuff all the time, right? Like, I had a job, I was working in radio, and then I would go home and I'd work on my campaigns, and on weekends I'd be campaigning or protesting, and I never really had a life. So it became kind of this thing of, like, this is my hobby and my passion, should this be my career? And is that a dangerous thing to make this my career? Should I just keep this a hobby? And so for so many years I was so ambivalent about, one, who gets a job in animal rights? Like, and school to me was, I did a couple years of psychology at the University of Windsor, and I went to college. I've taken so many millions of courses, from trying to be a travel counselor to trying to be a psychologist to, but none of it's what I wanted. I just did it. because there was the expectation that I would need to have something. But it's never what I wanted. I wanted to do animal rights. I always wanted to do animal rights. I wanted to campaign to help animals, full stop, that's it. And any job I got into, I would just drag animal rights into it anyways, and they hated me. So I remember I did a stint as a travel agent, and people would book a trip to Spain, and it'd be like, you're not going to go to the bullfights, are you? You know? Or like, we're going to Disney World, and it's like, oh, you know, well, make sure you don't go to the animal exhibits. So I was such a downer, and it just happens by default. It just comes out of my mouth, right? Like no matter where I worked or what I did, it's just the connection is just staring you in the face all the time. So I needed to make this a career, and I remember one night I was just hanging out on the internet, and there was a job posted for fur bearers, and it was in Vancouver. I lived in Windsor, and so I thought, okay. I mean, I had some experience in terms of just like that skill set, right? Where, you know, I had done a little bit of campaigning. I had, you know, some background in the media, obviously, some marketing stuff, some psychology. I could write a decent article. So some skills were transferable, but my expectation was basically to get rejected and take their feedback and grow from that, right? And long story short, I got the job. And at first, the job wasn't the job I have now. It was just basically to fill in for a maternity position. And so I took a leap of faith. I moved to Vancouver. I came here with 2 cats and a couple boxes, and that's it. And then I've never left. So worked at Fur Bearers for about a year, and that contract ended, and I started getting into dissection. For some reason, I just picked that up as being something I wanted to work on. And so the thing with dissection, and just giving you an example now of how one person can just run your own show, is I had a friend that was a graphic designer. She built me a website. All you need to start first, get a website. Websites, you can get them for free or for little cost. Even something like WordPress, you can put together something just online that's really simple that you can direct people to, and that becomes kind of like your foundation for what you're doing. All the information is there, the contact information and links. So that's what I did. So I put together frogsarecool.com, which is kind of home base, right? And then from there it began the kind of same thing where, you know, we worked on the circus issues. Okay, well, dissection, who's in charge? Who's the decision maker? So I started learning a lot, and what Rob Laidlaw was saying yesterday is do your research. So for me, that meant learning everything I could about dissection. So where does dissection happen? What animals are being dissected? Ministry of Education, what are the rules around dissection? Do kids have to do it? Do they not have to do it? What are the laws? Is it mandatory? Can kids get a failing grade? Can kids opt out? Is there anything to protect students from opting out? So these are a lot of questions that I had in putting together all of the research. And then through the process, I sort of learned who's in charge, which is the school board. Unfortunately, dissection, the Ministry of Education doesn't take a position on it. They don't go here or there. All that they do is they set the requirements that students need to learn biology. How they learn biology, we don't care. The teachers teach how biology is learned. So it creates a little bit of an obstacle, because what it does now is that it segments everything. I can't do a provincial blanket. I can only go to district at a time. And so that's kind of what I've been doing, right? So it started with Vancouver School Board, because I lived in the city of Vancouver. It made sense. Contacted the school trustees. This is an issue I care about. Can I meet with you? And I hit Andrea Reimer. If you're not familiar with Andrea Reimer, she's a city councillor right now, but she had a background at the time. She was the executive director of the Wilderness Committee. So it was a really good fit to target her, because I knew already she had a background in environmentalism. She cared about sustainability. So it was really great to connect her interest with the dissection issue. So talking to her about disposal, chemicals used in preserving specimens, about alternatives and how the garbage and everything that you can replace that with alternatives. So she was really receptive, and through her guidance, we were able to work with the school board, and eventually we passed. It was unanimous. We passed what they call a student choice policy in Vancouver, and that basically gives students the right on the books to refuse dissection and that's advertised in student handbooks and in course outlines, and students have to, or teachers rather, tell students in advance on my energy, I think personally, just because when I leave a room, I want to feel that I really connected with someone who took something away from what I said that was maybe that Dr. Phil moment. Like, I want to be Dr. Phil, right? Sort of. Well, you know what I mean? And so schools for me just seemed ideal, and it was like, and I'm kind of one of those people, if you've ever worked with me, I'm a bit of a pain in the ass, to be honest. I push hard, I drive hard. Adrian can probably tell you all about that. And I get kind of focused. Like, I get this thing in my head where it's like I see it, and it's like nothing gets in the way. I don't know why that is. It's just genetic coding or something. So, and for me, it was just like, I want to go to schools. And then you meet people and they're like, what do you mean you want to go to schools? How are you going to go to schools? Like, I don't know, just go to schools, get in there. Why not? You know, and literally that's what you do. You go in and get in there, and you just learn. And how do you do that? Well, same thing. Who allows people in schools? Teachers do. Great. Where are the teachers? Well, there's an entire BC federation of teachers on just over on Cambie Street, and you walk in the door and you're like, hey, I want to talk to kids about animal issues. Like, how do I do that? And when you do all this stuff, and there's a certain level of embarrassment, I guess, but it's like people want to help you though, and you meet somebody and you'll click with them, and that's what's happened. Is I've met teachers that are vegan. I've met teachers that really care about the environment. I've met teachers that are passionate about building empathy with their students and getting their students involved in controversial issues. So, and learning about what do teachers need, right? It's my interest to go into schools, but I want to talk in terms of their best interest. What can I do to make their job easier? And the teachers will tell you, well, whatever you're saying, I need this to make sense for learning outcomes, because teachers, like the Ministry of Education, basically sets a criteria of teachers can't just go off on one and do whatever they want. They have to follow sort of a set curriculum. So understanding how that works and reading the curriculum myself, knowing what it is that they need to teach, I just kind of match that with what my needs are. So it's like, well, a good example is, well, there's so many, social studies, let's say. So social studies teachers have to teach current issues. They need to look at some of the history of Canada. They need to know the process of lawmaking. A lot of critical thinking is part of the curriculum in social studies, getting kids to be active citizens. Animal rights is just the vehicle then to teach those things. So for example, just recently I went into a school and the kids were learning about the history of the fur trade. This was in Burnaby. And the teacher wanted to look at the history of the fur trade. Well, let's put that now in a modern context. And so it was an opportunity for me to go into the schools and show kids and talk to them about, okay, well, let's look at this. What made the fur trade so significant to Canada in our history, and what is that now? Is that significant now? Is the fur trade significant to Canada now? If yes, how? If no, why? Looking at traps and just getting them engaged about the issue and talking about the issue. So from the teacher's perspective, she was just happy that I was talking about the fur issue and she could just put a check next to the curriculum that she covered that off. For me, I was thrilled because it's like an opportunity to engage kids and into the fur talk. English is another really great subject for animal rights. Love it. English teachers, they spend obviously a lot of time with language. So there's some really good activities that you can do with students about the use of words and euphemisms. One of the breakout groups we had yesterday, we brought this up about, why is it that we call cows, burgers or bacon or veal, and these made up words that we give to make people feel more comfortable with what they're eating. So we have a lot of fun in the classroom where we'll do some role playing where, it's like, okay, well, this is, you're like working as a cashier at a fast food restaurant and you're a customer. So without using a euphemism, place an order. And then the kids, they laugh and they have a good time. So it's like, I would like to order a baby dead cow with some regular fries and a root beer. and they laugh and you know, but they get it. And it's a really non-confrontational way to raise the issues, to kind of have a good time. You're not really the enemy. You're just really facilitating critical thinking, which is all what humane education is. So getting into the schools is great, and that's something any individual can do. You don't need to be part of a group. You just need to understand what it is that teachers want, and you just need to be somewhat organized and have some creative ideas of what you're willing to offer. And if speaking is not in your comfort level, there's other ways that you can participate in schools. A lot of schools have really small environmental clubs, or some of them even have animal rights clubs that are made up of like 5 kids that they're just looking for a guidance, or they're looking to help on a campaign, or they need someone to come and just maybe do a small presentation about animal testing or something, and make it really visual and fun. Like I used to collect shampoo bottles and cartons and all kinds of products that I would just buy or I get from friends, and I would display them and have kids interact with them. You know, how do you know this is tested on animals? How do you know it's not? Do you know, look for the bunny logo? What does the bunny logo look like? We did one, a really funny thing in I think it was social studies. We had a product, and it was tested on animals. I can't remember. I think it was owned by Procter & Gamble, but I can't remember what the company was. But there was a 1-800 number on the label. So the kids were looking at it, and they're like, I don't know if it's tested or not tested. It doesn't say. So the next question was, well, how can you find out? Well, there's a number here. It says if you have any questions. Great, let's call it. So in the classroom, we had a cell phone, and we called the 1-800 number and put them on speakerphone. And so everyone in the class is quiet. There's like 30 kids, and they're all like, you know, it's like we're doing something bad. And the lady comes on and represents, no, can I help you? And then the kid said, I want to know if XYZ is tested on animals. And then she says some crap that's like, doesn't really answer their question, but what's your mailing address, and I'll send you more information. So we just gave the mailing address of the school, and it was a great thing, and the kids felt really empowered about that. Is now, as a consumer, I can get information for myself, and I don't have to like make some blind decision. And the best part about that is in a couple weeks, that class is going to get a letter, right? And so it's an opportunity for them to revisit the issue again and talk about the letter, and is that satisfactory for them? And they'll probably find out that, yes, that company tests on animals, 90% are rodents, so don't worry about it. and then they can have a discussion again. So those are some really easy ways of, if you're looking to really make a difference on a bigger level, reach the unconverted without spending a lot of money, without feeling like you need to be part of a massive group with a massive budget. It's just little things like that, I think, go a really long way to reach a lot of people, and there's resources out there to help you. Yeah.
So teachers are receptive to people who aren't representatives of groups, like
absolutely.
Individuals?
Yeah, you can give yourself a name. So like for me, I would say I'm just with Frogs Are Cool. Like I'm going to talk about animal testing and dissection. They don't care. Or you can say, you can approach an organization. So for fur bearers, say, like we would do mentoring and training. Like if someone wants to talk about the fur trade, and you could be a volunteer for fur bearers to go into a school. I know UrSave has similar programs. So if schools are something you're interested in, and you just feel like you would be more comfortable with to have a title, or like, you know, you can just approach somebody. But you can just say you're a local activist, and you have a lot of information about this issue, and you'd love an opportunity to engage their students, and you'd be willing to offer your time for a half hour, and yeah, so they're fairly receptive to it. One of the other things that I wanted to talk about today that's quite personal to me, and I think it's something that we all think about and know about, but no one really talks about, and that is burnout. So we kind of talk about it as like this thing that's, don't get burnt out. But to actually really talk about that, have a serious discussion about mental well-being as being an activist, because I think a lot of us don't do that. And being an activist can be the quickest road to being depressed and having a massive anxiety, feeling guilty, and just totally ineffective. And I think we all can have those moments to varying degrees. And I had an experience a few years back where I totally was done, cooked. that was it. And there was a point in time, if anyone said the word vegan, I was going to scream. Like, I was just so over it. And not that I ever lost my commitment to it. I just couldn't absorb anymore. I couldn't hear anymore. I couldn't see any more videos. Like, I couldn't do anymore. And a lot of that was my fault, in terms of time management, stretching myself too thin, not having enough resources, doing too much, not identifying my own boundaries or limitations, or even saying no. You know, I would just be like, sure, I'll do that, sure, I'll do that. And after a while, I crumbled, right? So it's so important, and I can't stress it enough, is that you are all, and I can't even, yeah, this is so important for me. You are all of you individually are so special. So special. You have no idea how special you are. The fact that you're here today, the fact that you took the time, a weekend, that you care so much about animals, that you're willing to sacrifice your time, your money, your relationships, your families in some cases, a well-paying career. There's so many sacrifices, I think, that we all make, that we all don't necessarily get that appreciation for, because the animals can't talk, they can't say thank you, and half the time you don't even meet them anyways. You just do this because you care so deeply and you're so moved by it. So the gratitude is you know, sometimes it's few and far between, right? And you just keep going, and whatever it takes. And I know people who, they have like 14 cats, you know, and they're like in debt, 50 grand, and you know, and all those crazy things. So I think as activists, we really need to be careful with how we manage our lives, and how to be sustainable in our own life, to know our limits, to ask for help, to ask for professional help if we need it, to surround ourselves by good people that are supportive, that aren't going to be judgmental or take us down. Like, all of those things, like the psychological preservation of yourself is something that is important to me, and that I learned the hard way. But I really want to send that message to you, to just be so gentle with yourself. And I know it's hard you always feel like you can do more, right? And that there's no rest for the animals, and every day and every second there's something horrible going on, so why should you have the luxury of going to a movie, or if you catch yourself having a laugh or a drink, like, you feel like a big jerk because why should you know, have this when this is happening? Like, all of those feelings I think a lot of us experience, but we don't really talk about, and I think we need to. I think we need to have really deep discussions about, yeah, I'm married to this guy and he eats meat, and it's a real problem in my marriage. I want to leave him, you know. And people say that. People feel like that. People feel so intense about what they do, and there's all these other social aspects to it, and psychological aspects that I think as a group we need to deal with together and be so supportive. So I'm going to ask something of everybody right now, a little activity we're going to do this is so fun, is I want you to hug the person next to you and tell them, thank you for being here, you are so important. And then anything nice that you want to say to them. But give somebody a hug right now, large. Love these people. Love these people. You feel the love? There's a lot of love in this room, I feel it. I feel like we need to break into song now or something.
Thank you so much.
But sometimes, isn't that nice though? Just to like, no one's gonna like, and sometimes I find, to be honest, I'm in an honesty mode right now, sometimes vegans can be the nastiest people. I'm vegan, I'm on the team, dude. So, but sometimes I feel judged. Like, I feel like, I've been vegan a long time, it's been like over 12 years. And sometimes I find the best friends I have are actually meat eaters, you know, because sometimes I feel like, you know, I don't know, it just like, it can be threatening, and you meet people that have varying degrees of experience, and they've done all these great campaigns, and they have all these victories, and they're like, you know, Mr. CEO of awesome, and you're just kind of like, you know. And it's intimidating, and especially when you're starting out, like it's like, I'm cutting down, you know, I just eat fish, and then you meet someone like, you know, like, and the thing is I've done that too. I've done that to people where it's like, you know, you don't know, like, so I think that we're all on that level, on that spectrum, right? I think we need to have humility as a movement. I think that we need to be gentle with each other. I think we need to look back and realize how long it took us to get to this point. And for me, it was a deadly cocktail, I like to say, of urgency and futility. The two worst things, and put those together and you have a recipe for disaster. And that's how I felt for a long time, where I had all this inside of me of like, I gotta save the world, I gotta save the world, I gotta save the world, and I need to do it yesterday. And it doesn't work. And you end up burning yourself out and going in circles, right? So I think breaking things down into what's achievable, going for that low-hanging fruit of things that are targeted, they're simple, they're within your means, they make sense, and focus. You don't have to save the world. It's okay to do less, and to concentrate on it and do what you're doing and do it well. And it's not about doing everything and doing more. It's about little things and doing it well, even if it just means being a good person. How many people are a-holes? You know, like being a good person, having good values, going out to vote, all of those little things I think really add up. So I think one of the things that I'd like to share also is that I'm 36 years old. It took me 36 years to get to where I am today. And I try and keep that in mind when I meet someone who's maybe new to our movement, or maybe just someone who's kind of curious, right? I like animals, but I could never give up meat, or, you know, I really like this fur coat because my grandma gave it to me. And I used to think, well, I'm going to show you a video and then I'm going to change that. and then I would get frustrated if they didn't change, because it was like, what? I just showed you this video. How come you're not vegan? Like, I don't get it. And then I would get angry, and then, you know, then I would turn on myself, because it's like, well, I must have done something wrong because they're not vegan. so I think understanding the fact that it's a process, and it takes all these little steps and all these little bits, right? And it'll happen. And I've seen it in my lifetime, and I'm sure you've seen it too, where there are changes. There's big things happening. There's big corporations now that are doing things they never did before. The availability of vegan food, the products that are out there now that never used to be, all of the great things that are happening, and some of the laws now that are changing, some of the public opinion that's shifting, and the trends that are happening, and those are things that we really need to celebrate. And all of those things are because of you. So you should really thank yourself for all the work that you do, because you're very important. And that's kind of my speech.